In the previous video, we introduced arguments and their structure, and in this video, we're going to introduce our process, our approach to evaluating arguments. And this process is going to form the basis for our approaches to the different question types in the argument section. Okay, so taking a look at this argument, it says, every year new reports appear concerning the health risks posed by certain substances, such as coffee and sugar. One year, an article claimed that coffee is dangerous to one's health. The next year, another article argued that coffee has some benefits for one's health. From these contradictory opinions, we see that experts are useless for guiding one's decisions about one's health. Okay, so like I said, in this lesson, we're going to look at our approach for evaluating arguments. And when you evaluate an argument, you assess its content and its structure, and that puts you in a much better position to answer the question correctly. Now, in order to usefully evaluate arguments for this section of the test, you will need to follow basically a three-step process. You need to determine what the conclusion is, what the premises are. You need to analyze the structure of reasoning, and you need to analyze the premises and conclusion. Now, this is presented as a step-by-step process, but in reality, this approach towards the arguments passages will become ingrained and automatic. Okay, so the first step in evaluating arguments is to determine what the conclusion is and what the premises are, and in order to do that, you simply summarize the argument quickly into one sentence just to get its core idea, its core essence. So, don't diagram the argument out next to the passage, you won't have time to do that. You need to summarize with the conclusion first, and because giving the support. Now it's easiest to remember that way if you just start off your sentence with a conclusion, followed by because, followed by the support. If it helps, you can also label the conclusion by underlining it or putting it in brackets, just so that you have the premises and the conclusion separated and differentiated visually in front of you on the test paper. And then once you're done, you move on to step 2. So, a quick summary here could be, experts are useless for health because articles change from year to year. And so you notice how the conclusion is first, experts are useless for health. Then we have the because, articles change from year to year, which is a summary of the different premises that support that argument, that support that conclusion. The next step is to analyze the structure of the argument. And there you're looking to see how the premises and conclusion relate to one another and how the conclusion is supported. So you're looking at the relationships between the statements that make up the argument. How does the information in one premise tie into the information in the other premises? How does the information in the premises tie into the information in the conclusion? Now, there are a wide variety of different ways in which arguments can differ from one another in their structure, but there are basic things to be aware of. The ways in which the statements reference one another. Are they abstractions, examples, consequences, or negations of one another? Things like that. Whether the statements form some sort of group, whether you can logically combine them. Are they alternatives or conditions for something? Now, this isn't an exhaustive list, so you make sure to pay attention to the arguments as you're studying for the test to develop your understanding of the ways in which the arguments are structured. Structure is going to be important, not just in the questions that deal explicitly with argument structure, but having an intuitive understanding of how an argument is structured will help you in evaluating it for every single question type. Okay, so once you're done, you move on to step 3. So in this case, the first premise is a general fact. The next 2 premises present specific examples of the situation from the first premise that appear contradictory, and the conclusion makes a claim based on this contradiction. Now, the third step is to analyze the premises and conclusion. How strong are the premises? Is the information complete? Do the terms shift from premise to conclusion? And is the conclusion reasonable? So you want to be aware of the strength of the premises. Are they facts or opinions? Are they credible? Are they from a good authority? Is there any bias? Are they reasonable and consistent, or are they extreme? So you need to be aware of the premises. You'll also need to look to see how complete the information is in the premises and conclusion. Is there any relevant information that isn't conveyed, and are there any implied assumptions that need to be dealt with? A shift in terms or problems with scope is when the premises are talking about one thing but the conclusion is talking about something different. And then finally, you need to check the conclusion for reasonableness. So you need to look for the adjectives and the qualifiers in the conclusion and what their degree is. Do they have an extreme conclusion using extreme language based on support that isn't as extreme, that doesn't warrant that? So, looking at our premises, we see that the 3 sentences before the conclusion are presented as facts. But we're not presented with a credible authority, and we see that the first sentence is qualified by an extreme adjective, every. It says that new reports appear every year. This doesn't seem reasonable, especially considering that it's not verified information. Also, the next 2 premises, that coffee is dangerous and that coffee has some benefits, are presented to show that they're contradictory, thus leading to the conclusion that experts are useless. But the 2 premises can go together. Something can be both dangerous and have benefits. Aspirin in large quantities is dangerous, but it has a lot of benefits. And looking at our second question, is the information complete? We can see that the premises deal with reports and articles, but the conclusion deals with experts, so there's some crucial information missing there to get from one to the other. Now looking at our conclusion, it says that experts are useless for guiding one's decisions about one's health. Now let's compare that to the premises. The premises say that new reports appear every year, that one year an article says the coffee's bad, and the next year another article says the coffee's good. So the premises focus on reports and on articles, but do they mention experts? No. The word experts appears for the first time in the conclusion. The premises don't talk about experts. They talk about related concepts like reports and articles, and we can assume that experts are involved in the writing of reports and articles, but concluding that experts are useless would be to use a different term. And that's something that will come up again and again in the arguments in this section. The conclusion will have a related but slightly different concept from the premises, and you need to train yourself to see whether or not the premises support what the conclusion is talking about, or is the conclusion out of scope. So the conclusion says that experts are useless for guiding one's decisions about one's health. The adjective that immediately jumps out is useless, because that lets you know how much you should trust experts with decisions about your health. Useless doesn't allow any room for compromise. It's an extreme adjective. Is that warranted by the info in the premises? In this case, the premises say that each year there are articles about what substances are dangerous for you that contradict the articles from the previous year. Does that mean that experts are useless for guiding one's decisions about one's health? No, of course not. Maybe experts aren't involved in writing these articles. Maybe not all experts agree with the contradictions. Maybe there are decisions about your health that don't deal with dangerous substances that experts all agree on. It would be way too drastic to conclude that anything that an expert tells you isn't useful simply because there are contradictions in articles concerning dangerous substances. In this instance, it's unreasonable given the premises. Okay, so that's the basic approach to use when evaluating arguments. Now, it isn't meant to be a checklist to rigorously go through for each question, because that would be too time-consuming. Instead, it's a basic structure to internalize to give you a framework for understanding and evaluating the arguments. Now, certain question types will require you to pay more attention to the content of the premises and conclusion and less to the structure, and certain question types will require you to pay more attention to the structure and less to the content. And we'll go over that as we introduce and explain the different question types. Okay, so to recap. When you evaluate an argument, you assess its content and its structure, and that puts you in a much better position to answer the question correctly. To evaluate an argument, you determine what the conclusion is and what the premises are, you analyze the structure of reasoning, and you analyze the premises and conclusion.